Thank you, everyone. Hey, Madison. My home at Searchlight here this morning, 45 minutes.
Wasn't sure how far up.
It's not that far. And I helped get a 4-lane highway. It makes it a little quicker from Railroad Pass. Any of you remember that road before you had 4 lanes on it? That was a death trap. It was the busiest 2-lane road in all of Nevada, and it took us a couple of years to get that done. But it really is a nice drive now to go there. Well, thank you very much for being here. We're going to leave most of the time for questions, but I want to talk a little bit about what I see happening here in Nevada and in the world as it relates to energy. Today in America, we will use 21 million barrels of oil. Tomorrow, we'll use 21 million barrels of oil. The weekend comes, but that won't stop us from using 21 million barrels of oil. Every day, 7 days a week, 21 million barrels of oil. Once the economy picks up, which it will, we'll use even more. We last year spent about $700 billion buying oil from these Middle East despots, this character in Venezuela. We have to lessen our dependence on foreign oil. We will never, ever be a secure nation unless we lessen our dependence on foreign oil. We cannot be secure when we're depending on these people for our electricity. That's basically what it amounts to. So what are we going to do about that? We know we can produce renewable energy in America. For a decade now, farmers in the Midwest part of the United States have been making more money, a number of them, with their windmills than they do on their soybeans and growing corn. They produce electricity with these windmills, just like the one you see out here. Most of them are much bigger, but not all of them. The problem with renewable energy is that most of it can be produced where people don't live. And so we have a problem. If we're going to have these massive renewable energy projects, we have to have a way of getting that electricity to where it's needed. And we can do that. And that's why we have in our economic recovery package billions of dollars for the so-called smart grid, which basically is nothing more than a superhighway to carry electricity from where it's produced to where it's needed. We believe that we can be energy independent in 10 years. Now, to do that, we're going to have a bridge. A year ago, we had a concern because there was a dispute between Al Gore and T. Boone Pickens as to what that bridge would be. But now it's pretty well understood that what we need is, for automobiles, we need batteries. And that's why in this economic recovery package, we have billions of dollars there that are now being spent to produce bigger and better batteries and build them here in the United States. Out here, there's an electric car that a man is working, trying to get that car so that they can have plug-ins at various places in the United States. I'm sorry, in Clark County, especially at our hotels. And just since that vehicle was put together, they have batteries that do twice as well as the one that's in that car. We're moving forward quickly with battery technology. But we can't, at this time, consider using batteries for these big trucks that haul things around the country. As we speak, there's 6.5 million trucks on the road, these big 18-wheelers, hauling produce, appliances, lumber, whatever it is. 6.5 million of them. The Swift Trucking Company, I met with the man that is the chief executive officer of that company a couple of weeks ago in my Washington office. When times were good, and that was only about a year ago, he was purchasing 175 of those great big trucks each week. Okay? And we need to convert those to natural gas. In America today, we have huge amounts of new discoveries with natural gas. And the reason we're interested in natural gas, it has 90% less bad stuff in it than diesel fuel and regular gasoline. So we want to convert those trucks to natural gas and batteries for cars. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we do a lot better job of producing large amounts of electricity with renewable sources and take this where it's needed. But also, and Nevada is a good example where something is really good happening, and that is do something about individual homes, windmills, solar panels on the roof. So a lot can be done, and Nevada is a place that sets an example for a lot of the rest of the country because we have a big, real high renewable portfolio standard, which means that a certain percentage of electricity that we produce in this state must be done by renewable sources. So that's a brief overview of energy. I've talked about renewable energy, but there are other things that we need to be concerned about. And that is, buildings are constructed haphazardly in our country. There are some specifications. Most all buildings are built with the lowest bidder. And of course, the contractors want to produce it as cheaply as possible, and rightfully so. That's what they've been told to do. But the poor company or individual that buys that building, they get a building that's very energy inefficient. 45% of the energy we lose comes from buildings. So we have to have building codes that mandate energy efficient buildings. We also have a lot of things we can do with electric lights, that we can do with appliances that will make this country less dependent on fossil fuel. So there are a lot of things that we need to do in addition to just the renewable energy that we talk about all the time. So I'd be happy to answer any of the questions, any questions you want to talk about on this subject or anything else. And I also want to express my appreciation too. I had a wonderful energy summit here last August 19th and 20th. And then this past December in Washington, I had another one. And we've had people at these events that have been really good. President Clinton, we've had one in December, we had many of President Obama's cabinet. Al Gore was there. It's worked extremely well. And I appointed a blue ribbon panel to work with me and to find out what direction I should take in many different areas. And we have a number of my blue ribbon panel here today. I appreciate very much your being here. We have Scott Rutledge, Nevada Conservative League. We have Cindy Ortega, who is working on energy efficient programs for the MGM Mirage. Dave Jones, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Janine Harder, Renewable Nevada. I disagreed with Bush on virtually everything except cell phones. One of the things that he demanded is no cell phones when he was talking. Well, I'm not president, I can't demand that, so don't worry about it, love. Janine Harder, Renewable Energy. Linda Bullen, who is an outstanding lawyer at Lionel Sawyer, the state's largest law firm. Chris Brooks, Bombard Electric, who does great work in installing these renewable energy programs. And I thought the mayor of Mesquite would be here, Susan Holochek. She's not here, but she has been on all these issues just really good. She'll be here before the event's over, and I hope all of you will look to her after this is over with and introduce yourself. She's really added a lot to Mesquite, Nevada. Okay, questions. I'm ready for you. I hope. Yes. And if you would, for the audience, if you just mention your name and why.
My name is Scott Walker. I'm with Cathar Energy, and we are a distributor of solar technology. We've had success in Germany and in Spain, delivering, building solar parks. And that was primarily due to the institution of feed-in tariff laws, which require the utilities to buy the electricity produced by renewables at a certain amount over 20 years. Because of that, 50% of the solar installations are in Germany, where their irradiation level is not nearly as high as it is in Nevada. And I was wondering, Senator, whether there has been discussion of a feed-in tariff system here in Nevada.
You would have to talk to the state legislature about that. We have, on a national level, had discussions about what we could do, including this. to stimulate people generally using it. One of the problems we have had in the past with renewable energy is we can produce it, but the utility companies don't have to take it, and that's a problem.
Mr. Reid, I was wondering, it sounds really good about the job that we're going to get, but is there any way, like, I don't know if your office could do it or how we could do it, integrate the unions into making sure that we have these clean energy jobs even from the start, from like the incept of a particular project to the fruition of it?
Well, the bill that we passed, the economic recovery bill, has Davis-Bacon in that, so all jobs come from that are Davis-Bacon. And for you, for those of you who don't understand, that means that these contracts and the work has to be done with, you can't do it with people who don't know what they're doing. Let's see. Yes?
Could you speak to the possibility of
Gotta follow the rules here. Tell us who you are.
Scott Rutledge, Nevada Conservation Land. Senator, could you maybe speak to the passage of a renewable energy standard at the federal level and what that will mean for Nevada?
We need to pass on a national level a reasonable renewable portfolio standard. That means on a national level, we have to make sure that on a certain date that a certain percentage of all energy produced in the United States is done from renewable sources. And that's going to be part of what we're going to work on this year. There are three main areas that we need to legislate. Number one is the easy stuff, and I talked about that. Appliances, building codes, a renewable portfolio standard. That's fairly easy work to do legislatively. The second area we need to work on is to have a super highway to take electricity to where it's needed. That is so important because if we produce a lot of electricity in Nevada or Arizona or New Mexico or off the oceans in the Northeast, that doesn't do anyone any good unless you can take that energy where there are people. And so that's the second area we have to work. And the third one is all the stuff dealing with global warming. Okay. Yes.
My name's Jeff Drockler. I'm just a citizen here in Las Vegas.
Good.
Committed to helping the solar industry grow in the state. I've spent many years working in computers, electronics, networking, telecom. One of the things I've observed is that when there are standards, things become less expensive to do and become more widespread. For example, Ethernet is the standard network for computers, but that was only after there were many different types that were evaluated. Ethernet 1, now everybody has Ethernet. Is there some emerging standards for renewable energy interconnects and hookups?
That's what all this superhighway stuff's going to be about. We have to do that. We have, I'm told there are 5 centers where we have to be able to carry electricity. You get to one of those centers and then the energy can go where it's needed. Right now we don't have that highway to get that done. So the answer is yes, we're working on that. Let me say this. Also, the reason I'm not moving around here very much is we have some folks from Reno that are watching this. And I'm wondering, Madison, are we going to be able to get any questions from the folks in Reno?
I don't know if we're set up for that. No.
Okay, well, anyway, they can hear us, so watch your language. Okay. Yes.
Senator Reid, my name is Nelson Stone. I'm a civil engineer with a local firm here called Kinlan Martin.
You know, can I just say this? He says he's a civil engineer. Do you know where the name civil engineer came from?
I'm sure you can tell.
I can tell. I had a group of civil engineers within the past month come to Washington to meet with me. And I've always been curious, why are you called a civil engineer? Out of the 4 of them didn't know, 1 knew. So in the future you can tell everybody this. Prior to a university in Alabama producing engineers, the only engineers produced any place in America were our military academies. The Naval Academy at West Point and the Naval Academy, of course, at Annapolis. And they had to have a name for these people that came from Alabama. They called them civil or non-military engineer. So, okay, go ahead.
Thank you. My question is with regard to the BLM and the federal agencies that review the permits on federal lands. There's, last time I looked, there's probably several hundred solar, wind turbine type sites actually submitted to the BLM. And I'm curious, as we look forward, what things can be done to improve their ability to get through those permits much more quickly, because they seem overwhelmed.
They are overwhelmed. There's a man whose name has been submitted to be head of the BLM. We in Nevada should celebrate this. His name is Bob Abbey, who was the state director before, and he's going to be the national. If everything works out right, he will be the national director of BLM, which is very, very good for Nevada and certainly good for all renewable projects. There has to be a streamlined process. These are all new, unique areas, and that's why on a number of large projects are going to be built on private land, not on public land, because there you don't need all the federal. You don't need the federal permission. But Senator Salazar knows this. He is a real proponent of renewable energy, and one of the states that's done a remarkably good job with renewable energy is the state of Colorado. And I expect Secretary Salazar now to come to Nevada within the next couple months. I talk to him often. He's a wonderful person, and we are going to just fine with him. He's I think out of all the cabinet officers, I just think he's so good. Yes.
My name is Lou Truman. I understand this is about new electricity, but I have a question for you about old electricity, which I'm very concerned about. If any of you read the paper this morning, they predicted that Lake Mead will drop another 30 feet by June. Is there any pressure by Washington to put pressure, I should say, on the Colorado River Commission for realignment with regards to water rights?
The question is, got everyone here? The law of the river is pretty definite. It's hard, very, very difficult to change. Pat Mulroy, who is we call her the water witch, she has done a wonderful job in her tenure as head of the Southern Nevada Water Authority. When she took office, the state of Nevada and the state of Arizona were not on speaking terms as it related to water. And now we're doing great things with the state of Arizona. They're entitled to a lot more water than we are. They can't use all their water. So the water that they can't use, we are paying to pump that into the Arizona aquifers. In exchange for that, we bank water so that we can take water when we need it and it's not available to us out of the river because out of Arizona's share of water. So progress is being made. The problem we have, Lou, and the rest of you here, is we are in the middle of a terrible drought. This year, we believe that the water in the Sierra Nevada will be about 20% short of a normal year. We've had some normal years in recent years in the upper Colorado, but because of the global climate change, it's evaporating and not getting into the river system. Lake Powell is basically a reservoir for Lake Mead. Lake Powell was the largest man-made lake in America. And unless things turn around the next 5 or 6 years, that lake will go dry. And we're doing some things here in Southern Nevada, as you know. They're building costing more than $3 billion, another intake, so that because the intakes now are too high in the lake system. So we're very dependent on what nature is going to do or not do. But if anyone wants to question global warming, all you have to do is take a look at what's happening here in the West. It has been very, very scary. Yes.
Following up on that, Senator, Theo Spencer, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and first of all, thanks for putting Tim Hay in touch with us. He's been a great colleague. We met with Pat Mulroy yesterday, and she said that Lake Mead was at 1,090 feet, and at 1,075 is when they go to the first rationing. And you mentioned climate change.
I'm just wondering what the timeline is for federal action on global warming legislation, and if you're still intending to combine energy and climate legislation as part of one package. I know the House is moving ahead, Congressman Waxman, and I'm just wondering if you could say a little bit about timetable and the political will that you see to get that done this year.
The issue is we are different than the House of Representatives. In the House of Representatives, if you're in the majority, you can move anything you want. Not that way in the Senate. The Senate was set up to protect minorities, not racial minorities, not religious minorities, just minorities. And it was set up, it was a great compromise in June of 1787. They were trying to figure out what to do. And so they came up with the House of Representatives, who are elected every 2 years. No one's ever appointed to, if somebody dies or resigns in the House, you have to have a special election. In the Senate, it was set up to move very slowly, and the founding fathers would be happy to know we've succeeded beyond
Jefferson's rolling in his grave.
But as Benjamin Franklin said, it's really the coffee to cool what goes on, and that's true. There are many examples of that in recent years where the House rushes into something and we have to slow it down, and we do that. Now, the problem we have with global warming legislation is it's coal versus doing something. Coal, C-O-A-L. Because there are many, many states that are, as we speak, heavily dependent on coal. Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, these huge states with lots of people in them are very dependent on coal. And there's a group of about 12 senators, could get up to even 15 senators, who are very, very concerned about what we're going to do with global warming, because they're afraid that these states that are heavily dependent on coal are going to be hurt very badly. So that's the struggle we're in right now. We're going to do something about global warming. We're going to do our very best, but we have to get to 60 votes. Al Franken will help us. He will should be with us in another 2 or 3 weeks. I got to go through the Supreme Court issue there. So we'll get up to 59. But that's where we are, and we know how urgent it is. But you know, people, the coal. There's no one in this room knows more about the power of coal than I do, because as you know, I've had an ongoing battle with building coal-fired generating facilities here in Nevada, and we've done pretty well. When I decided that I was going to oppose these coal-fired generating facilities, I really got a lot of grief from my own staff, because politically they thought it was an unwise thing, and time will tell if it was unwise or not. But I think that NV Energy, Nevada Power, has really stepped forward, and I think they've, from what I can tell now, they're going to try to diversify and not depend on coal. So we're doing very well in that regard. But it's a long, hard struggle, and we're going to do our best to do something about it. I had somebody come to me and say, we can't do anything until China and India does it. We don't have the luxury of waiting. We've got to set an example, because we're a small percentage of the population, but we use about 30% of all the energy used in the world today. Yes?
John Lobb, working with EV Charge America, the guys with the electrical car outside. Is there going to be any incentives to help the strip hotels set up electrical vehicle charging stations so we can start getting that infrastructure in? So
John, that would be a good thing to do. That's going to be up to the state legislature. We'll be happy to work with them, happy to help in any way we can. This is the future of America. We can have all the energy cars in the world. We can have all the natural gas trucks in the world, but if we don't have some place to refuel them, we're just wasting our time. Every time I see Mr. Lobb, I think of his wonderful father, who was the man that came here and was the person that led Southwest Gas for such a long period of time, a wonderful citizen of our state, every time I see you, I mention to you what a fine man your father was.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, we got the mustache.
Tim Stipple with Greater Vegas. We're a local nonprofit that supports these type of initiatives. Thanks for coming today. I'd like to know, there's a lot of businesses out there who won't be able to, because of the nature of their industry, reduce their energy needs and are still going to be big polluters. Yet nonetheless, they want to be able to contribute to a greener future. I'd like to know what your support of is of carbon credit brokers, how that might relate to tax incentives, and whether you see that as playing a part in this new.
I think that we should go into this debate with everything on the table. I've had people come to me and said, we cannot have a tax. It has to be all trading. Well, let's take a look at it. I mean, I'm willing to look at anything. I have seen what's happened to our world. It's changing dramatically. And so I think we should start this discussion with everything on the table. And I think that the fact that the House is going first is a tremendously important step. Henry Waxman is a brilliant legislator. I've been told that you're going to find what comes out of the House is something you should be able to do in the Senate. I've talked to Henry, Chairman Waxman, about that. One of the things that I am focused on personally is a superhighway, a way of carrying this electricity where it's needed. And he gave me his assurance that there will be, before that bill comes over from the Senate, there will be something in there that will be in keeping with my legislation. So that's how I feel about it. I think everything should be on the table. Yolanda, you had another question.
Sir, I was wondering, will it be a volunteer committee to do some of the groundwork, research, whatever?
The answer is yes, but right now we don't have that worked out. The answer is yes. Well, I have my blue ribbon panel here, which is something I did, but I think we're going to have to look to government also doing something as I've done. Yes.
My name's Walter Kukulik. I work for a home builder in town. One of the challenges that home buyers face in today's market is that there is insufficient information and the appraisal process is broken for building better homes. And what I mean by that is I can build a great home that's a zero energy home where it has $25,000 of energy efficiency and renewable energy items in it. I go to 100 appraisers today, 99 of them will give me $0, or give the borrower $0 to buy this better home, even though it costs less to own and operate. And so what is being done on a national level to help address this? Because there's buyers out there that want to buy better homes, but they can't because they can't borrow the money to buy these better homes. So what the industry is telling us as a home builder, we should build the worst homes that we can because that's all people can borrow. And so
you're absolutely right, and you're illustrating better than I did. One of the things we have to do with this legislation that's going to come out of Jeff Bingham's committee, dealing with building codes, not only for big office buildings, but for homes. Not only would the home that you're talking about be better for the people that are living in it, but it's better for all of us. And there may be a little additional cost, and there will be, in doing that, but it's going to pay dividends in the long run. This wind turbine out here, you really would not have to. They'll take it apart every year because they're teaching their people how to do it. Frankly, we don't need to do that. They do it to see if any of the bolts have come loose and all that. But there's basically no maintenance in one of those wind turbines. And solar has a little more that can go wrong with that, but not much. So the long-term savings is significant in having buildings that are built right. And I think that we can't have one size fits all, because we don't need a building here in southern Nevada that's the same as they have in Anchorage, Alaska. So, but we're working on that. Jeff Bingham, I think, is on it. And he's a senator from New Mexico, doing very well. I think that's the direction we're taking. Yes.
Dustin Ball, Las Vegas Sun. You mentioned how much oil we use a day or a week, I think it was.
21 million barrels a day.
Yeah, there you go. we all want to get off that, obviously, but it's not gonna happen tomorrow or the next day. So I'm wondering what we're trying to do to, I mean, get it from our own land. They talked about the North Slope in Alaska for a while, which has predicted quite a bit of oil and natural gas. I'm wondering if that's still in the works, or what are we doing to stop relying on foreign countries and use what we have here?
There was a debate a year ago that went on through the campaign. John McCain said, "Drill, baby, drill." Remember that? And that became a real powerful message, because everyone thought that everyone in Washington, Democrats, didn't want any more drilling. We don't oppose drilling, but we don't have the ability here in America to produce enough oil to satisfy the needs of our country. We produce, as I've indicated, we import 70% of our oil. So 30% of our oil comes from here. The rest of it comes from someplace else. And I think that there's been concern after the Exxon Valdez and the big spill they had off the coast of Santa Barbara, that we have to make sure we do this in a decent manner. A number of the people said, with the drill baby drill scenario, Katrina nothing happened. Well, that's not true. We lost lots of oil with the outfits off the coast, the drilling rigs. So we need to make sure that we have the ability to produce oil here in America. And right now, let's see if I can get this done. My numbers may be a little bit off, but there's about more than 20 million acres of land that has been bought by oil companies to drill on. They can do that right now. No one's stopping them. They talk about, let's drill in other places off the coast. If Congress said yes, it would take 10 years before the first rig would go out there. So I think that what we have now, Salazar is a man that's not opposed to doing more offshore drilling if it can be done environmentally sensitive manner, and there are some ways that are better than others. But we're not going to produce our way out of the problems we have. We can't do it. Yes?
Troy Nordic with TMA Global Wind Energy System. We're looking to relocate our company here from Cheyenne, Wyoming, and we have offices in Colorado. And we have dialogue with both Shannon and Lydia in your office, and we're just kind of curious to know the most effective way to proceed in some assistance from the new programs that are available to.
Yeah, well, I hope they line you up with the Southern Nevada Development Authority or whatever that is called now, because they are looking for people just like you. I met within the past month with the governor of Wyoming. Herschler was the previous governor. What's his name? Friedenthal. And he came in to visit with me, and he said, I just left I think he said he was at the National Mining Association or someplace like that. And he said, I just defended you. He said they were beating up on you pretty good because you were saying there's no clean coal. And I got up before him and I said, read dry, there is no clean coal. Now here's a governor coming from a state that is either the #1 or #2 producer of coal in the entire country. And he said there's no clean coal. Now we all hope there will be clean coal someday, but there isn't now. And it'll be at least 10 years before we'll know. But in addition to that, here's what else he said. The state of Wyoming now has the ability to produce 80,000 megawatts. Think how much that is. 80,000 megawatts of electricity with wind. Here's the issue, though. He said what's happening is they're coming in and getting permits to have a 10 megawatt, 20 megawatt wind farm. And the first thing they do, because we have money in this stimulus bill of billions of dollars to help provide a way of taking that someplace. So we have numerous small entities who want to build power lines with wooden power poles. We can't do that. And the reason he came to see me is we need he needs and others need federal assistance to help build these huge metal power lines that can be constructed. And once the electricity is flowing, there's a way to pay back the federal government for the investment in the power lines. So Friedenthal's a very, he's a Democrat from a heavily Republican state, but he's such a bipartisan guy. People love him in the state of Wyoming. And as indicated, to have him come and agree with me on coal was quite unusual. Yes.
Senator, thank you for coming out. My name is Kevin Child. As you know, we talk about oil and gas and the renewable energies. We push these things to one side or to the left or the right. Here we have gasoline tax that pays for our roads and highways. We forget about that. How are we supposed to pay for our roads and highways when we start eliminating the fossil fuels? Also, when you go into the renewable energies with solar and wind, you're going to make NV Power, one of the power companies, higher up because we're losing less of their power. So how do we balance this act here? We forget about all that money that we're going to lose. Again, I'm going to go back to the oil and the gas that we spend, and the people that can't afford the new cars. A lot of workers, working men and women in Nevada and throughout the United States.
There is no question that people with the economic downturn and people just even before that with a high price of gasoline simply haven't been buying as much fuel as they did in the past. And that has hurt the Highway Trust Fund. And we had to add to that general revenues when we did this last bill. So I think we have to look to a different way of paying for highways, bridges, and mass transit, as we have in the past have financed all that out of the Highway Trust Fund. There's 18 cents is the federal gas tax. Every time you go to buy gas or diesel fuel, there's money goes into the Highway Trust Fund, and the purpose of that is we've already talked about. There are others looking at different ways of financing that, maybe on miles driven. I'm not sure that's a good idea, but people are looking at different ways of doing that. But I think we have to recognize this, or at least I do. Every time we come up with a way of not using more fossil fuel, we're all better off. And if it means that we're going to have to figure out some other way to finance our highways, we're going to have to do that. If you had somebody here from NV Energy saying that we said we have ways of saving electricity, they would be in favor of that. What NV Energy wants to produce all their energy here in Nevada. They don't want to have to import energy as they're doing now. So I don't look at it as a negative that we are not using as much gasoline as we have in the past, not as much diesel fuel in the past. Yes? He's the guy with the electric car.
Yeah, we had that pretty red electric car out, 100%.
It's a Porsche.
Mostly for effect, because the fact is, today you can buy electric cars for under $10,000. So it's a misnomer that they're only for the rich or expensive folks.
Tell everybody what you told me about my wife's car.
Today we are converting Priuses, 2004 and up Priuses, to plug-in cars. And by simply adding a plug-in feature, you can plug into home current electricity, you can double the mileage from 40, 45 miles to a gallon to over 100 miles to a gallon.
And tell me how much would it cost to convert that?
You mentioned earlier that battery technology is the key, and today lithium batteries are still very expensive. They're about $12,000 worth of batteries to put in a car like that to get that kind of mileage. But there is a payback in terms of eliminating the use of gasoline, and an enormous payback to eliminating greenhouse gas.
And haven't you seen, in your experience with these batteries, the price of them going down fairly quickly?
It's coming down very, very rapidly. And this is the question I wanted to ask. Virtually all of the technology that we're buying to convert cars, because we're waiting for Detroit to bring electric cars onto the scene.
We're in fact waiting for Detroit to bring any cars on the scene.
The electric motors are coming from China. The batteries, as you mentioned, are coming from China. Solar panels are coming from China. A lot of the hardware is all coming from there because it's cheaper and available. Are there federal initiatives planned at any level to help get Detroit on board in this program?
The money that we have in the economic recovery package for battery technology was pushed by Stabenow from Michigan, and it's all going to be spent here. Yes. The answer is yes. One of the things that that I terribly disagreed with the Bush administration is not spending money in science. And in the economic recovery package, we put huge amount, billions of dollars, in the National Science Foundation and other scientific programs. And so the professor you talk about, there's a lot of money available. And the other issue I want to just mention briefly, I don't believe all this money should go to Stanford and Harvard and Yale and Brown. And that's why a number of us have fought very hard for congressionally directed spending, that is, earmarks, because otherwise these big fancy universities suck in all the money, and brilliant professors are all over America. They're not just in those Ivy League schools. Okay?
I'm Linda Bullen from Lionel Sawyer and Collins, and I'm working on a number of renewable projects here. And because Nevada, like many of the western states, are primarily owned or administer the land by the federal government, we have to go through the NEPA process. And that's what I think is slowing the projects down more than anything. And I'm just wondering if any thought has been given to any changes in NEPA.
The answer is, has there been any thought given to changes in NEPA? And the answer is yes. But it's hard to do. It's easier said than done. We've talked about it over the years. And so the answer is yes. But how to change it really is not determined yet. A couple more questions, and I'm going to go off to something else. Yes?
David Jones, IBW 357. I thank the Senator for being here, but I'd like to ask a question in respect to all the proposals we've had in the past of developing either wind technology, generation, or solar at Nevada test site, considering all the jobs that have been lost out there over the years, and the current Department of Energy having the responsibility to try to keep the program open as well as maintain the facility. Is there any possibility that to eliminate the process of BLM approval if there's some large-scale projects that could be put at the Nevada test site?
I have had conversations with Secretary Chu about that. He, as you know, is a Nobel Prize-winning scientist, brilliant man. We're so fortunate that he has the job that he has. He's the one that's identified, it used to be called smart grid. He said, no one knows what you're talking about. We need a superhighway. And so I've plagiarized what he has called this. The test site has lots of problems. The problems are these. Because of the existing law, anyone that wants to come in there and do something has to pay for a percentage of the entire operation of the facility, and has made it so we haven't been able to get a lot of good things done there. But what I've talked about with the Secretary is maybe setting aside some of that land, massive amounts of land we have there. And we could talk about a NEPA process if we needed to, but on some of those areas where we'd like to build these, we don't really have to be too concerned about that. But the law is the law, and until we change it, if we do it on the Nevada test site property, anyplace else, we'll still have to follow NEPA. As I indicated earlier, one of the things that's happening is that we have people now who own large pieces of private land who are considering at one time building homes and other things. They're now in negotiation to build renewable energy projects, which will speed up the process significantly. Yes.
Senator, Tom Houston, CEO of Valley Electric, one of the other electric utilities.
Isn't it about the only other company? Is it? No, I'm serious. It's the only other electric company in Nevada, isn't it?
No, there's approximately 8 of us. We are the largest member of.
Okay, that's fine. But yours is significantly larger than any of the others.
That is correct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Why don't you tell everyone here the areas you serve?
Okay, we serve the rural areas of Nevada, such as NV Energy, but we serve from Sandy Valley on up to along the California-Nevada border, almost to Bishop, California.
How many customers do you have?
Approximately 22,000. Question and a statement. First off, there was discussion on federal legislation for renewable portfolio standards. Presently, our utility and many public-owned utilities are not under a standard, a mandate that would require us to have a renewable portfolio standard. So do you foresee that coming in federal legislation? And then the statement that I have is that we are presently working on a program to take advantage of the CREBS Clean Renewable Energy Bond that will allow our utility to pay for and install a domestic solar water heater on every residential account that we serve. So we're looking forward to your support on that. That will create approximately 100 jobs for the next 3 years for our service area.
In answer to your question, I have not heard a single word that we're going to or not going to have this apply to the non-public utility companies. One last question. Yes. As I indicated earlier, the cap and trade legislation is extremely difficult because of the coal-dominated states, some coal-dominated states. There aren't that many of them, but you add them together, it's a lot. I mean, it keeps me from getting 60 votes unless something changes. So we're working on that. And as I indicated earlier, I think the key to this is what happens in the House of Representatives. The House has the same problems that we have. That is, they have a number of congressional districts that are heavily dependent on coal. So we're now in contact with Chairman Waxman, seeing what we can do to help it all, and trying to make him understand that we want him to come up with the best bill he can, but also one that we have some opportunity of working on in the Senate. We would like to have them as close together as possible if we're going to complete some legislation. There have been some, and I should have responded to a question earlier earlier. Someone asked me, we're going to do this all in one big piece of legislation. The answer is yes now. But originally, we were going to do it in 3 separate pieces. That is the energy stuff out of Bingham's committee, which would deal with appliances, it would deal with building codes, and it would deal with renewable portfolio standard. That would be one piece of legislation. The other would be the legislation that I'm talking about, that is the smart grid or the superhighway. It's 2 separate pieces of legislation, and then the global warming would be a 3rd piece. But there's been a general feeling we'd probably be better off doing it all at the same time. And so that's what we'll have a shot at that. Everybody, thank you very much for being here.